The next sutta, 3.11, Nalaka Sutta. This one about the birth of the Buddha and the description of the qualities of enlightenment. I think another one of those that were created later. One day during the afternoon siesta, the sage Asita noticed that the 30 gods had all gathered together. This sage Asita is supposed to be taking his afternoon siesta in the heaven of the 33. Full of joy and overflowing with praises to Indra, they were dressed in the purest white and waved their robes and banners with delight. Seeing all this excitement, Asita respectfully asked the gods what it was that they were celebrating. Why are you all so happy and joyful, he asked. What's all this waving and whirling of banners for? I've never seen such excitement as this, not even when the gods won their battle against the Asuras. What can they have seen now? It must be something wonderful for there to be all this rejoicing. They are singing and shouting, playing music, dancing around, clapping and waving. Tell me why, you people from the top of Mount Meru. Please answer my questions, put my mind at rest. And the god said, in a village called Lumbini in the Sakyan country, a bodhisattva has been born. A being set on Buddhahood has been born. A superlative being without comparison, a precious pearl of the health and goodness of the human world. That's why we are so glad, so excited, so pleased. Of all beings, this one is perfect. This man is the pinnacle, the ultimate, the hero of creatures. This is the man who, from the grove of the seers, will set the wheel of Dhamma turning, the roar of the lion, king of beasts. When he heard this news, Asita left the Tusita heaven and went straight to the palace of Suddhodana, king of the Sakyans. Here you can see again, it's definitely a later writing. Raja Suddhodana is not the king of the Sakyans, but Dia is. There, when he had sat down, he said to the Sakyans, where is the prince? I would like to see him. So they took the hermit Asita, the unattached as he was called, and showed him the newborn prince. He was shining, glowing and beautiful. It was like seeing molten gold in the hands of a master craftsman as he takes it out of the furnace. To see the prince was to see brightness, the brightness of the flames of a fire, the brightness of the star constellations crossing the night sky, the brightness and clarity of the autumn sun shining on a cloudless day. It was a sight that filled the hermit with joy, and he experienced great delight. In the sky above, invisible beings were holding up a vast canopy out in circles from its center and stretched over 1,000 spokes. Other gods waved yak-tailed fans on golden stems, and these gods too were invisible. The long-haired sage, the dark splendor as he was called, looked at the baby lying on the orange clothes, shining like a golden coin, with the white sunshade held up above him. With great joy he picked him up. Now the lion of the Sakyans was in the arms of a man who had waited for him, a man who could recognize all the signs on his body, a man who now, filled with delight, raised his voice to say these words, there is nothing to compare with this. This is the ultimate. This is the perfect man. Just then the hermit remembered that he was going to die quite soon, and he felt so sad at this that he began to cry. The Sakyans asked him why he was crying. Is the prince in some danger? They asked. To settle their worries, the sage explained to them why he felt sad. No, he said, there will not be any danger or threat to the prince's life as far as I can see. In fact, for him there won't be any obstacles at all. There couldn't be for him. He is not an ordinary being. This prince will come to the fulfillment of perfect enlightenment. This prince of supremely pure vision will start turning the wheel of Dhamma out of compassion for the well-being of many. The religious life will be fully expounded. But for me there is a grain of sadness and a pain in this, for I will not live much longer now, and during his life I shall die. So I won't be able to see this man of such unparalleled strength teaching how things are, and that's the only reason that I felt sad. The Sakyans were thrilled to hear what he said. and he left them, went out from the inner rooms of the palace, and set out to follow the practices of a pure and virtuous life. But as he was leaving, he began to think of his nephew, Nalaka, and full of compassion, he stopped to tell him about this man of unequal strength and his teaching. One day, he said to his nephew, "You will hear someone talking about a Buddha. You will hear of a man who has reached full enlightenment by following the correct path. When you hear this, go and find out all the details of his teaching. Go and live with this master, this Lord, and follow the practices of a pure life." And Nalaka, helped by the merit he had accumulated by many years of good and wholesome actions, remained alert and restrained, always moderating the play of his senses, looking forward to the appearance of this conquering hero. In time the news did come. The Buddha started to turn the teaching wheel. On Asita's advice, Nalaka went off to find this noble sage, and having done so, asked the man of wisdom about the highest wisdom. "What Asita told me many years before has turned out true," said Nalaka. "I can see that now. You, Gotama, have reached the perfection of all things. May I now put a question to you, Master? I have lived for some time as a wanderer, and now I would like to live as a monk. So please answer this question for me. What is the highest wisdom state?" And the sublime master replied, "I will explain the wisdom state to you, a state which is hard to get and hard to put into effect. Come, be alert and full of effort. Develop the mind of equilibrium. You will always be getting praise and blame, but do not let either affect the poise of the mind. Follow the calmness, the absence of pride. Forms, both high and low, come across like tongues of flame from a log. Women tempt the sage, but you should not develop the desire for them. Being free from sensuous union, without aversion or attachment towards beings, however weak or strong they may be, comparing oneself to others in such terms as just as I am, so are they. Just as they are, so am I. He should neither kill nor cause others to kill. The impulse, I want. Here this impulse is probably volition. And the impulse, I'll have. Lose them. That is where most people get stuck. Without those, you can use your eyes to guide you through this suffering state. Eating little and moderate in food, with few wants and free from greed, he is unafflicted by wants. He is desireless and calm. This is the pattern that the man of wisdom follows. He goes round collecting offerings for his meals, and then he goes off to the edge of the woods or the grove and sits down under a tree. He applies himself to meditation practice. With his skill in this practice, he can find it pleasurable. He can make himself joyful, living under a tree on the edge of the wood, meditating. He spends the night like this, and in the morning sets off for the village. He does not get distracted. He does not get excited by the offerings and invitations that people offer him there. Once he has reached the edge of the village, he does not rush from door to door. And when he is begging for food, he does not talk about it or pass any hints. He simply says, "This is what I've been given, that's good." Or, "I haven't been given anything, that's fine." With this attitude towards begging, he can return undisturbed to the tree. So he wanders around with begging bowl in hand. Although he is not dumb, he seems to be dumb. He accepts even the smallest gift of the giver without scorn and without pride. The methods, both quick and slow, by which Nibbana may be discerned, have indeed been expounded by the ascetic Gotama. It is never discerned twice. This perceiving of the beyond is realized gradually. When a person is desireless, when a monk has extinguished the river of becomings, when he has given up all the activities of duty and obligation, what ought to be done and what not ought to be done, then the fever is past. Yes, said the Sublime Master, I will explain the wisdom state to you. Be razor sharp. Keep your tongue relaxed so the tip is resting on the roof of your mouth and your stomach or appetite is restrained. Let go of the chained minds, the states involving attachment. Do not spend much time thinking about irrelevancies. No defilements, no ties, no dependency, only dedication to the practices of a pure life. In the discipline of living alone, in the service of hermits, it is the silence of solitude that is wisdom. When the solitude becomes a source of pleasure, then it shines in all the 10 directions. This is the sound of the meditation of wisdom, of those who have let sense pleasures go. When you, a follower, hear this sound, then you grow in confidence, modesty, and strength of practice. Listen to the sound of water. Listen to the water running through chasms and rocks. It is the minor streams that make a loud noise. The great waters flow silently. The hollow resounds, and the full is still. Foolishness is like a half-filled pot. The wise man is a lake full of water. The hermit can talk of many things with good sense and precision. He can describe the way things are from a position of knowledge. There is much that he can talk about from that position. But when a man of knowledge retains his self-control, when a man of knowledge speaks only a little, then you have found a man of wisdom, a man for whom that silence is appropriate and deserved. Such a man has found the silence of wisdom. This sutta is probably a later addition. I get to the next sutta, 3.12. Dvayattanupassana Sutta. Thus have I heard. Once the Buddha was staying in the eastern part of Migara mother's estate at Savatthi. One evening on a full moon day, he was sitting in the open air with all the monks gathered round. He saw that they were silent, and so he spoke to them. Monks, he said, it sometimes happens in this world that things are said concerning skillful states. Distinguished and liberating statements are made that lead to full enlightenment. Now monks, why should you bother to listen to those statements? People may ask you the same question, and if they do, you should answer them like this. It is for the purpose of knowing two things as they have come to be. They may ask you what these two ideas are. If they do, you should answer them like this. The first insight is this. This is suffering, and this is what causes it. The second insight is this. This is where suffering stops, and this is how you get there. These are the twofold insights. Grasp them together, and in the course of a life of energy, dedication, and care, you can expect one of two results. There will either be the fruit of perfect knowledge, or, if any essential components are not yet exhausted, then there will be at least no further births. When the Buddha had said this to the monks, he went on as teacher to explain. There are people who do not understand suffering. They do not know where it comes from, where it totally ends, or how to get to where it ends. So without a chance to emancipate the mind, without a chance to attain liberation by mind or liberation by wisdom, they cannot effect an ending. They can only go on, being born and getting old. There are also people who comprehend suffering, who know how it happens, where it totally ends, and how to get to where it ends. They have got the liberation by mind and the liberation by wisdom. Now they can effect an ending, no more going on, being born and getting old. This is the proper twofold insight. But you may be asked to describe it in another way, and that you could do like this. One insight is that grasping is the basis of all suffering, grasping or attachment. The other insight is that by the complete cooling and cessation of all this grasping, there is no more arising of suffering. These are the two insights. Grasp them together, and with energy, dedication, and care, you can expect one of those two results. There are many kinds of suffering in this world, and all of them grow from the same source, grasping or attachment. When a man knows no better, he gives way to this grasping, and slowed and dull, he goes through one misery after another. So do not create it for yourselves. Use your knowledge to see how suffering begins and develops in attachment. There is another way of describing this twofold insight. One insight is that ignorance is the basis of all suffering. The other is that by the complete cooling and cessation of ignorance, no more suffering is produced. These are the two insights. Grasp them together, and with energy, dedication, and care, you can expect one of those two results. Constant traveling from birth to birth, from this form to that form, again and again. This is what results from ignorance. It is due to this ignorance that people's minds become dull and muddled, that they go on endlessly wandering from life to life. But if you walk towards wisdom, you leave these rebirths behind. You do not go on becoming. There is another way of describing this twofold insight. One insight is that sankhara or volitions are the basis of all forms of suffering. The other is that by the complete cooling and cessation of volition, no more suffering is produced. These are the two insights. Grasp them together, and with energy, dedication, and care, you can expect one of those two results. Every form of suffering grows out of a mental volition. Eradicate the volitions, and no more suffering is produced. Consider this harmful consequence of volitions, that they are the basis of suffering. By the complete calming of the volitions and the stopping of the train of perceptions, suffering disappears. Wise men understand this in accordance with fact. With right knowledge, the wise ones overcome the yoke of Mara. There is no more rebirth for them. There is another way of describing this twofold insight. One insight is that consciousness is the basis of all suffering. The other is that by the complete cooling and cessation of consciousness, no more suffering is produced. These are the two insights. Grasp them together, and with energy, dedication, and care, you can expect one of those two results. Every form of suffering grows out of consciousness. By the cessation of consciousness, no more suffering is produced. Consider this harmful consequence of consciousness, that it is the basis of suffering. But once consciousness is quietened, a person's craving ends. Total calm is realized. There is another way of describing this twofold insight. One insight is that contact is the basis of suffering. The other is that by the complete cooling and cessation of contact, no more suffering is produced. These are the two insights. Grasp them together, and with energy, dedication, and care, you can expect one of those two results. For some people, contact, the point where sense plus sense object meet, is enthralling, and so they are washed by the tides of being, drifting along an empty, pointless road. Nowhere is there any sign of broken chains. But others come to understand their sense activity, and because they understand it, the stillness fills them with delight. They see just what contact does, and so their craving ends. They realize the total calm. There is another way of describing this twofold insight. One insight is that sensations or feelings are the basis of all suffering. The other is that by the complete cooling and cessation of sensation, no more suffering is produced. These are the two insights. Grasp them together, and with energy, dedication, and care, you can expect one of those two results. Those two results should be liberation by mind and liberation by wisdom. Whether it is pleasurable sensation or unpleasant sensation or neutral sensation, whatever is sensed internally or externally, one should understand all this as suffering, as deluding experience, as fragile experience. One should see with insight its rising and falling nature, and by this means should be detached towards it. The monk becomes free from craving and completely calm by the elimination of sensations. There is another way of describing this twofold insight. One insight is that the thirst of craving is the basis of suffering. The other is that by the complete cooling and cessation of this thirst, no more suffering is produced. These are the two insights. Grasp them together, and with energy, dedication, and care, you can expect one of those two results. When a man walks hand in hand with the thirst of craving, he will wander from birth to birth, now here, now there, and with never an end in sight. Consider this harmful consequence of craving, that it is the basis of suffering, and with this knowledge you could let the thirst dissolve. The clinging would go with it, and you would be free to live, always mindful as a wanderer. There is another way of describing this twofold insight. One insight is that clinging is the basis of all suffering or attachment. The other is that by the complete cooling and cessation of clinging, no more suffering is produced. These are the two insights. Grasp them together, and with energy, dedication, and care, you can expect one of those two results. Becoming is dependent on clinging. When one comes to suffering. A person who is born dies also. This is the production of suffering. And so, perfected in understanding, the wise dissipate all clinging. They have seen how the forces of becoming can be stopped, so they do not go towards more births. There is another way of describing this twofold insight. One insight is that effort or exertion is the basis of all suffering. The other insight is that by the complete cooling and cessation of exertion, no more suffering is produced. These are the two insights. Grasp them together, and with energy, dedication, and care, you can expect one of those two results. Every form of suffering grows out of exertion. Eradicate exertion, and no more suffering is produced. Consider this evil consequence of exertion, that it is the basis of suffering. And when all exertion has been abandoned, there is the freedom of the effortless. For the person whose feverish thirst is destroyed, and the mind has become calm, the cycle of birth and rebirth is left behind, and there is no more coming back for rebirth. Stop here for a moment. Why it says this suffering grows out of exertion. If too much energy, if too much desire to be liberated, then you won't become liberated. There is another way of describing this twofold insight. One insight is that nutrients or sustenance are the basis of food, are the basis of all suffering. The other is that by the complete cooling and cessation of nutrients or sustenance, no more suffering is produced. These are the two insights. Grasp them together, and with energy, dedication, and care, you can expect one of those two results. Every form of suffering grows out of nutrients. Eradicate those nutrients, and no more suffering is produced. Look at the harmful consequences of nutrients, that they are the basis of suffering. When you have comprehended all nutrients, you do not get attached to them. When someone fully understands what is healthy, then he can do away with the asavas. He can stand firm and clear-sighted in the practice of the teachings as a person fulfilled, as a being beyond definition. These nutrients, the Buddha says that all beings need food. So if we continue to take food, we continue to make this body live. And especially if we are attached to it, it creates problems. So it's not that we don't need nutrients at all, but not to be too attached to it, probably. But if a person is very tired of the world, then he probably doesn't want the body to continue to live. But just by starving himself, he cannot get out of the world. He has to use wisdom. There is another way of describing this twofold insight. One insight is that mental agitations are the basis of all suffering. The other is that by the complete cooling and cessation of these agitations, no more suffering is produced. These are the two insights. grasp them together, and with energy, dedication, and care, you can expect one of these two results. Every form of suffering grows out of agitation. Eradicate agitation, and no more suffering is produced. Consider this harmful consequence of agitations, that they are productive of misery. Therefore, give up agitation, break the impulses or volitions, and free from agitation and clinging. Let the monk mindfully wander along. There is another way of describing this twofold insight. One insight is that there is trembling for one who is dependent. The other is that the one independent does not tremble. These are the two insights. Grasp them together, and with effort, dedication, and care, you can expect one of those two results. The independent man does not tremble or get confused, but a man who is dependent on something is clutching, grasping at existence in one form or another, and he cannot escape from existence. Consider this evil consequence, that there is grave danger in being dependent. Therefore, relying on nothing, the mindful monk wanders on, free from clinging. This dependent means you are attached to something. For example, beloved family members, your property, your wealth, because you are dependent on them for happiness. So anything happens to them, you will suffer very much. But a monk, he gives up everything. He has no family members to give him suffering. He has no property to be afraid of losing, etc. There is another way of describing this twofold insight. One insight is that there is calm in the formless. There is more calm in the formless than in the formed. The other is that there is more calm in cessation than in the formless. These are the 2 points. Grasp them together, and with effort, dedication, and care, you can expect one of those two results. Beings who do not understand cessation will come back to the process of re-becoming, whether those beings be those of the sphere of form or of the sphere of the formless. But those beings who, having understood the nature of form, are well established in the formless and free themselves in cessation, are the ones who leave death behind them. There is another way of describing this twofold insight. One insight is that what the world at large, inclusive of its maras, recluses, Brahmins, as well as men and rulers, thinks of as truth, the higher beings, the men of worth, see quite clearly through their superior wisdom as false. The other is that what the world at large thinks of as false, the higher beings, the men of worth, see quite clearly as the truth. These are the two insights. Grasp them together, and with energy, dedication, and care, you can expect one of those two results. In the world, inclusive of its gods, substance is seen in what is insubstantial. They are tied to their psychophysical beings, and so they think that there is some substance, some reality in them. But whatever be the phenomenon through which they think of seeking their self-identity, it turns out to be transitory. It becomes false, for what lasts for a moment is deceptive. The state that is not deceptive is Nibbana. That is what the men of worth know as real, as being real. With this insight into reality, their hunger ends, cessation, total calm. So, for a person of wisdom, the world is false. Only Nibbana is real. Because the world is like a dream, changing all the time. There is another way of describing this twofold insight. One insight is that what the world at large thinks of as pleasure, the higher beings see quite clearly as suffering. The other is that what the world at large thinks of as suffering, the higher beings see quite clearly with their superior wisdom as blissful. These are the 2 points. Grasp them together, and with energy, dedication, and care, you can expect one of those two results. Whatever there is which is said to be existent, the delightful, enticing and pleasant forms, sounds, tastes, odors, tactile sensations and thoughts, these are all agreed upon by the world, inclusive of its gods, to be happiness. In your world, these things are thought of as pleasures. and yet when they cease, they are thought of as suffering. To the higher beings, when the individual body and personality comes to an end, it is considered to be blissful. But this varies sharply from the way it is seen by the rest of the common world. What is generally called blissful is called suffering by men of worth, and what is generally called suffering is known to be blissful by them. Be aware of this paradox. It is difficult to understand, and the ignorant are in error in this regard. It is dark where they are trapped. It is pitch dark for the blind, and crystal clear for the wholesome. For those that can see it, there is light. But if you are blind to the teachings of the way things are, if you know nothing of the path, then you will not be able to make out anything, though you may be right on top of it. This teaching about the way things are does not become a force of full enlightenment for someone who is infected with desire, yearning to be, or for someone who is in the grip of Mara. For who else can justifiably reach this state of full understanding except for those beings of distinction? Who else has come to understand this state and disperse all the forces of confusion? This is what the Buddha said on that occasion. The monks were full of gladness and joy when they heard these things. Indeed, some 60 monks let go of all clinging and grasping during this talk, and they were freed of the asavas. So we stop here for tonight. Nothing to discuss. You can see from the suttas we have gone through that some of them are later additions spoken by the Buddha. Okay, can we stop here?